Hi everyone, today I want to show you how to make this super cute, soft and squishy indoor snowball using your 22 pin knitting machine. Anything bigger than this and the snowball is going to come out giant. So if you want to make giant snowballs you can, but my tutorial is going to be for a 22 pin small circular knitting machine. To make these super cute snowballs you are going to need some white Aran weight, worsted weight plain acrylic yarn. You're also going to need some white chenille or fuzzy yarn. I'm using James C. Brett Flutterby. You're going to need some embroidery scissors, a needle, and you're also going to need a load of toy stuffing or polyfill, whatever you call it in your part of the world. So without further ado, let's get cracking. To make life easier for you all to see what I'm doing, for this tutorial I'm not actually going to use white. I only have a white backdrop and white on white is just going to give you snow blindness. So I'm going to use coloured yarn, but you can use white for your snowballs. This is just to make things easier for you to see. To start your snowball you want to cast on and knit 25 rows of solid colour acrylic yarn. When you cast on, make sure that you cast on really slowly on these machines because they absolutely hate it if you have any sort of tension on your cast on row. So you're going to cast on in the usual way. I've got another video that shows you how to cast on if this isn't familiar to you. I've popped a link up in the top corner. Zero your counter after your cast on row. So we want to actually physically knit 25 rows excluding the cast on row. So go ahead, knit 25 rows and I will meet you back after we've done that. Just finishing the last row now. That's row 25. Once you get to 25 rows, you want to cut your yarn, leave a really nice long tail, take your yarn out from your yarn guide and make sure that that last pin takes your last stitch. And then you want to go ahead and cast off this tube. This one's done. So you cast off in the normal way where you work round and pick up all the stitches and then take the tube off the machine. And then you can take that tube off your machine, pop your machine to one side for a minute and you can straighten out this tube. And that tube we can pop to one side for the minute because we don't need that until later when we're popping our snowball together. Next we need to make our second tube that's going to make up the outside of our snowball. My machine, I have not found a way to cast off without completely wrecking chenille yarn, so I have come up with a little tweak that helps me work with the chenille yarn more easily and stops me from losing my temper at it basically. So first of all, we are going to make another tube like we did before, but this time we're going to incorporate the chenille yarn, which is going to give the fluffy outside of the snowball. So you want to cast on and knit 2 rows. So cast on, zero your counter and then knit 2 rows. So I've knit 2 rows in my plain acrylic, and now what you need to do is break your yarn, open your yarn guide and drop your yarn into the middle of the tube. And then what you want to do next is you want to join your chenille yarn. You'd probably be using white at this stage, and you want to knit 21 more rows. So don't zero your counter and knit to 23. Just make sure this white pin takes the yellow yarn down in with it. So I'm just coming up to the end of row 23 now. And what I want to do once I get to row 23 is cut the chenille yarn, drop the tail down into the middle, making sure that the white pin grabs it, and rejoin my yellow yarn, or white in your case. Then what you want to do is knit 2 more rows in your plain acrylic yarn. This makes it 100 times easier to cast off because you're not dealing with this fluffy worm shedding all over you and snapping. Trust me, it makes things so much easier. So cast on your plain colour yarn again and knit 2 more rows. until you get to 25 rows in total if you haven't zeroed your counter. And then, just like we did with the first tube, you want to cut your yarn and leave a decent tail, and then you want to go around and cast off by picking up all the stitches. If you don't know how, I have a separate video, so you can go ahead and take a look at that, but it really is an easy process of just picking up the loops from the machine as you go around. So again, make sure that white pin takes in that last stitch, and then just go around casting off the stitches as you go, and I will meet you back once we've done that. So I've now cast off my work. It's come off the machine nicely, and then we can get rid of this because for the next part we don't need the machine. Give your tube a bit of a stretch just to even out the stitches, and then turn it inside out. I just find that when I'm making the snowballs, the purl side of the stitches, or what a lot of machine knitters call the wrong side of the stitches, look prettier. Okay, so the next bit is the fun bit. This is where we're actually going to put our snowball together and get it looking snowball-like. First of all, you want to get your tube that you made first. I found that when I made these in just single layer, I could see the stuffing through the gap. So I decided the easiest way was to make 2 tubes and double layer the snowball. So we can leave our chenille tube to one side for a minute. And basically you want to just cinch the end closed of your first tube in the same way you would a beanie. Pull it nice and tight so that you've got minimal hole, and stitch it closed just to make sure that it's not going to come undone. It's not that crucial for this part because you are going to encase it inside another tube, but I just find if it helps if you just crisscross over a few times to cinch that hole closed tightly. And then when you're done, you can pop the end on the inside if you want. You don't need to cut the ends because they're going to be hidden inside the finished snowball. So just pull that tight, lob the end in there. And then what you can do is you need to get some of your toy stuffing and you need to start filling your snowball and get it looking in a relatively round shape. This part isn't quite so crucial because if it's a little bit wonky, when you add the outer layer on, you can kind of smush it into shape. So push your stuffing in and round it out. You want to stuff it more than you think it needs. Obviously you want to make sure that all the stuffing fits in it, so you can start to cinch the top closed as you're putting stuffing in to make sure that that stuffing is going to stay in there and not explode out at you. Hold it down and pull, you'll see this end start to tighten up. You can give it a bit of a smush round to get it looking circular, but as I said, once you add the chenille end on, it makes the world of difference. So that's what it should look like. You want to it to look like about tennis ball sized on these machines. And then once you've undid your stuffing on, cinch the second end closed, you want to go ahead and sew close the end like we did with the opposite end. Again, it doesn't matter really how neatly you do this because this is going to be hidden on the inside of the snowball. You can loop it through to make a bit of a knot to hold it in place. And then once that's done, bury the end into the middle of the snowball, pull it through. You can trim it if you want, and it will disappear off inside the snowball. So that's our first layer done. Then you want to get your outer layer, and you want to get these 2 stitches here where the 2 yarns joined, and you want to knot them. If you knot them quite tightly they'll be hidden, and I'll show you a really good way of hiding them inside the snowball when you're done. So don't worry too much about what they look like now, because they're really easy to hide, especially because we're using chenille yarn. So a couple of good tight knots. Don't cut your ends yet. You'll see why in a minute. Then you want to find the end of your yarn, if I can find it, and cinch one end closed, just like we did earlier. When you are using all white yarn, this is really, I mean, obviously it looks really obvious at the minute, but when you're using just white yarn, you can barely see this 2 rows of white yarn. It's not visible at all. So then you want to cinch this end closed, in the same way we did earlier. Obviously perhaps pay a bit more mind to how neat your stitches are, because these are slightly visible on the outside. Don't cut the end off this end for now. Right, and then what you want to do is get your first snowball layer and pop it into the inside layer, like a little pea in a sleeping bag. You'll probably want to deal with these ends as well. So again, just on where you joined the yarn at the opposite end, do a couple of nice tight knots. And I will show you how to hide those in a moment. There. Again, don't cut the tails, leave them as they are. They're really easy to hide in a minute. So smush your inner snowball into its furry little house. You want to give this yarn a stretch round a little bit, just to make sure that you're not pulling the stitches too gapey at any other point in the make. Pull it nice and tight. You want as small a hole as possible. Once you're happy with it, you can give it a bit of a smush in a minute, then you can get the end of the opposite side that you've just tied off. So when I said leave the end a few minutes ago, that's because what I like to do is I get the end that I've just tied off, pop it into the middle of that snowball and push the needle up so that it pops out on the opposite side of the snowball, and then pull the yarn all the way through. Make sure that it's neat and tidy at that end and that nothing is trapped, which it isn't. And then you can use this end of yarn to help you tie tight the other end. In the same way that you'd knot closed a beanie, you can tie a knot. It'll help cinch this end closed nice and securely, and you are also making sure that the end from your other end of your snowball is secure too. Then you can cut the tails slightly, thread them back onto your needle, and then you can slide your needle back into the middle and pull it out somewhere on the edge of your snowball. Pull the yarn tight and cut, and when you smush it, the ends will disappear off back into the inside of your snowball. Then it's fine. And then you can do the same with these ends that you've knotted. Thread your needle, try to go in roughly where the knot is, pull the yarn out on the other side of the snowball somewhere, pull it taut and cut, and when you smush the snowball, those ends will disappear. I'll just show you again. thread your needle, feed the yarn in roughly where the knot was so that you've not got any travelling yarn, pull it through, pull it tight and cut. And then if we give it a bit of a smush, you can see that we have one slightly strange coloured but a snowball nonetheless, and these make for hopefully slightly less painful snowball fights, because I don't know about you, but my kids always end up hurting themselves when they have a snowball fight, so maybe we'll try this year. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll hopefully see you again for another tutorial soon. Bye!